Have you ever felt like you're operating far below your true capacity, as if some deeper reservoir of energy and meaning within you remains untouched? This sensation, the quiet ache that there is more to life than what habit and routine provide, is not a delusion. William James insisted that such intuitions are invitations, glimpses into a hidden but real layer of existence that most people never learn to access. He believed that our ordinary waking consciousness is only one special type of consciousness, while all around it lie potential forms of awareness entirely different. These, he argued, may determine the conduct of our lives just as much as the visible world we inhabit. They are not magical. They are psychological, ethical, spiritual. They are the unexplored resources of the self. To awaken this vital energy is not to attain supernatural powers, but to become inwardly alive. It means reclaiming what James called the strenuous mood, a condition in which belief, feeling, and will converge to elevate life from mechanical repetition into moral adventure. This activation does not happen by chance. It demands a decision to take one's inner experience seriously, to respond to one's own unrest with courage, and to allow faith to precede certainty. This video, drawn exclusively from the work of William James, invites you to confront your own inertia. Through his radical insights, you will learn how to release the energies buried within you, not through dogma, but through a pragmatic philosophy of action. If something in you stirs while hearing these words, do not ignore it. That stirring. Is your life asking to be lived from the inside out? Let us begin with the silence that precedes awakening, the suspended breath of a soul on the verge of recognizing itself. You walk through your life believing you are this fixed entity, a name, a profession, a collection of habits and memories. But what if all that you take for granted is only a thin layer of consciousness, a surface tension stretched over a depth you've never dared to explore? William James urges us to question the solidity of this ordinary self, not to destroy it, but to break it open. James did not preach the cultivation of energy in the manner of a motivational speaker. He observed with rigorous psychological precision that men and women harbor vast reservoirs of unused power, moral, volitional, affective, that remain dormant until stirred by some inner revolution. What awakens these energies? Not pleasure, not routine, but crises, upheavals, intense emotions, and above all, belief. To believe in something greater than our current condition is not naive. It is the first step in enlisting forces within. We didn't know existed. He writes of second winds, those moments in which, having reached our limit, we push beyond it and find new strength. But these second winds are not confined to athletic endurance. They exist in our moral and spiritual lives as well. You thought you could go no further. You believed the best of you had already been spent. And then some strange opening. A tearful encounter. A book that found you. A night when despair gave way to something not quite hope, but defiance. That is the threshold. That is where James meets you. He believed that energies are released through decisions. Not abstract reasoning, but concrete choices, especially those made under pressure. When you act as though something is true, you make it more true. When you risk, when you invest emotionally, the energy required to sustain your belief begins to flow. The universe, James said, may be unfinished. And you, through your exertions, are part of its completion. This is not poetry. It is psychology grounded in metaphysical humility. It is the willingness to say, I do not know what I am, but I will act as if I am more than I seem. I will live as though life itself depends on whether I awaken my inner forces, because it does. So, if you are watching this and wondering whether your buried powers can be accessed, James would answer not with assurance, but with challenge. Try, commit, believe, and then observe what happens. If the results do not come immediately, Wait. Be loyal to your inner experiment. Live inside your hypothesis. Something will shift, and if this message resonates, if some subtle current within you feels stirred, we invite you to walk with us. Subscribe. Leave a sign of your presence, a signal that you too are on this path of discovery, not just intellectually, but existentially. You are not alone, and your deeper energies are listening. There is a peculiar rhythm to awakening. It does not arrive like a thunderclap or an angelic vision, though we often romanticize it as such. Rather, it slips in through the fractures of our routines, through discontent, fatigue, and the uncanny feeling that our lives have become too small for the vastness we carry. William James devoted much of his intellectual life to studying these cracks, these existential interruptions, as the gateways to a more potent experience of being. He was no stranger to despair. He knew what it meant to feel fractured, to be undone by doubt and paralyzed by indecision. But what sets James apart from his contemporaries is that he did not regard these moments as failures. He considered them as necessary phases in the evolution of the self. The soul, he wrote, is not born once but many times, and each birth is preceded by a rupture, when you feel yourself growing numb to the life you've constructed. When the things that once thrilled you now seem hollow, James invites you not to retreat, but to inquire. Ask what it is that your spirit seeks. He saw energy not as brute force, but as directional. It has a moral vector. And until you align your actions with your inner necessity, your energies remain scattered, diffused, asleep. He describes with striking clarity the transformation of character that can occur when a person begins to live from what he calls the more of experience. This more is not necessarily religious. It can be aesthetic, ethical, interpersonal, or mystical. What matters is not its name but its intensity, its ability to reorganize the self around a new center of gravity. Such transformations are not theoretical, they are lived. And they are often marked by sudden, unexplainable surges of vitality. James tells us of people who, after years of inner struggle, suddenly feel seized by a new mood, a new conviction. They feel lifted. Their fatigue vanishes. Their doubts recede. What causes this? Not logic, not argument, but the willingness to surrender to a possibility, to treat their inner unrest as a signal rather than a pathology, to trust their own experience even when it leads them beyond the known. And here is where the pragmatic genius of James reveals itself. He does not ask whether your awakening is true in the metaphysical sense. He asks what it does. Does it heal? Does it strengthen? Does it empower you to live more courageously? If so, then it is real in the only way that matters. It works. So let us not reduce energy to calories or neurons. Let us speak of moral energy, spiritual courage, existential fire. Let us consider the possibility that the universe contains not just physical laws, but invitations, calls to intensify our being, to become what we sense we could be, but have not yet dared to actualize. And if you are feeling that call, James would not demand that you understand it. He would only ask that you not ignore it, because what lies on the other side of your hesitation may not be certainty, but it will be life in a deeper key. Life with the voltage turned on. To understand what William James meant by the activation of inner potential, we must first confront his radical claim that the boundaries of the self are not fixed. You are not a closed system. You are porous, open to influences, forces, and experiences that exceed your conscious control. This idea is not mystical in the vague sense. It is phenomenological. It arises from observing what actually happens in moments of transformation. James noticed that when individuals undergo profound shifts in energy, it often feels as though something other than themselves has entered the scene. He does not leap to supernatural conclusions. Instead, he insists that these forces, whether called inspiration, grace, or genius, belong to the hidden architecture of the psyche. They are part of you, even if they feel foreign. And their arrival is often triggered not by mastery, but by surrender. Think of those moments when a new idea grips you, when a work of art pierces you with sudden clarity, when the face of someone you love stirs a feeling that words cannot hold. In these instances, something flows into your field of consciousness that you did not construct. It comes unbidden, but not undeserved. James believed that such experiences mark the arrival of energy from what he called the subliminal self. This subliminal self is not a shadowy double. It is the depth dimension of who you are. It contains your intuitions, your forgotten memories, your ethical instincts, your unexpressed longings. It is the seat of what is possible in you, but not yet actual. To live fully, James argues, is to enter into a dialogue with this deeper self, not through technique, but through openness, honesty, and risk. Many people try to summon energy through willpower alone, but James warns against this. Willpower, when isolated from belief and emotion, is brittle. True energy arises when will aligns with desire, when action is infused with meaning. You must want something enough to suffer for it, to organize your life around it, to let it shape your identity. Only then does energy flow. And here the stakes become clear. If you ignore the signals from your subliminal self, you become divided. You perform one life while another life waits inside you. This division is exhausting. It drains your vitality. You may continue to function, but you no longer live. You react instead of respond. You endure instead of engage. You sleep with your eyes open, but if you respond to that quiet call, if you say yes to the unknown content of your own depths, something begins to reorganize. You feel the weight of your decisions increase. Your days acquire texture. Your actions begin to feel consequential. And even in pain, you sense you are on the path. This is what James calls the strenuous life, not one of constant effort, but of authentic intensity. The path to inner energy is not a staircase. It is a spiral. You return again and again to the same questions, but each time with more honesty. You descend to rise. You lose your balance to find your core. And what you discover is not a new self, but the self you were meant to be all along. There are moments when life feels like a performance of someone else's script. You move through your days fulfilling roles, meeting expectations, preserving a version of yourself that once made sense but now feels hollow. William James calls this condition the divided self, a state in which your surface existence contradicts your deeper intuitions. You sense there is something more, some truth, some calling, but it remains just beyond reach. And yet, it beckons. James took these moments seriously. He saw them not as dysfunctions, but as thresholds. The discomfort you feel when your inner world no longer aligns with your outer behavior is, for him, a sign of vitality. It means your deeper energies are stirring. It means your soul refuses to be silenced. The process of inner unification, of moving from division to wholeness, is not a matter of quick fixes or affirmations. It is existential work. It involves reckoning with the parts of yourself you've ignored, the questions you've postponed, the longings you've dismissed as impractical or irrational. James insists that these elements must be integrated, not denied. They are not your enemies. They are your compass. He was fascinated by conversion experiences not in the religious sense alone, but in the psychological sense, moments when a person's inner orientation shifts so profoundly that they emerge with new energy, new priorities, even a new identity. These transformations often come with pain. They demand a death of the false self. But in that death a fuller life becomes possible. James challenges the notion that belief must follow evidence. In existential matters, he argues, belief may be the condition for evidence. If you wait for proof before acting, you may never act. But if you act in good faith, if you live as if the deeper meaning is real, you may discover a vitality that confirms your intuition. You may find that the energy was waiting for your courage. This is why, for James, the spiritual life is not about abstract metaphysics, but about lived experience. It is not about doctrines, but about consequences. What does your belief do for you? Does it give you strength? Does it help you endure suffering? Does it awaken love, hope, conviction? If so, then it is real in the only way that matters. So ask yourself, what are you refusing to believe because you fear its implications? What part of you remains unlived because you demand guarantees? What might happen if you trusted your experience not naively, but with the sober intensity that James admired? Could that trust be the beginning of your inner integration? And here is the question that may trouble you or free you. What if the truth you seek is already inside you, waiting not to be found, but to be followed? You do not need to become someone else. That is perhaps the most unsettling and liberating idea in William James's psychology. The self you long to be is not a foreign ideal or a distant aspiration. It is already within you, latent, muffled, half-dreamed. What you need is not transformation in the theatrical sense, but revelation, a way of seeing what has always been there with such clarity that it demands to be lived. James argued that identity is not a fixed entity but a process. The self is constantly being shaped by habits, choices, moods, and beliefs. And yet, within this flux, there is something consistent, a direction, a gravitational pull toward what he called the more. This more is not outside of you. It is the inward surplus that waits to be awakened by attention and decision. He studied lives that had undergone sudden changes in meaning, where people shifted from despair to commitment, from numbness to fire. In each case, the shift was not caused by external circumstances, but by an internal realignment. A decision, however small, cracked the surface. A surrender to something unproven. A yes spoken in the dark. This is the paradox. Your energies are released not when you assert control, but when you consent to be moved. James speaks of this as letting go. Not passivity, but an active receptivity, a willingness to let life touch you where you are most afraid of being touched. To let your inner potential announce itself not through triumph, but through vulnerability. The danger, James warns, is in becoming too accustomed to your own limits. You begin to confuse habit with identity. You say, "This is just who I am," when in fact it is only who you have been repeatedly. He calls this the habituated self, a self that runs on grooves of behavior worn deep by repetition, not by reflection. And the tragedy is that many never realize those grooves were chosen unconsciously, perhaps, but chosen nonetheless. To break the groove is not to rebel. It is to remember. To recall the unacted intuitions, the unexplored desires, the suppressed visions that once stirred you. James believed that the mind, when aligned with a sense of purpose, could unlock energies that remain otherwise inert. He saw this not as mysticism, but as pragmatism. What works to free the self from stagnation is what deserves to be believed. And so the work of awakening is not heroic in the conventional sense. It is intimate. It requires you to notice what you ignore, to value what you have dismissed, to believe not because it is easy, but because it is necessary. Because the alternative is to keep living half asleep in a life you no longer recognize as your own. Energy, James teaches us, is not a resource we possess. It is a relationship we enter. It arises when we align with our own truth, when we stop pretending, when we commit to a path without knowing where it ends. And the only way to discover what you're capable of is to walk that path, even when every step feels uncertain. There are times when your entire world contracts, when the colors dim, the days blend into one another, and your very presence in life feels optional. William James knew this terrain intimately. He did not write from the safety of theoretical distance. He wrote from the edge of despair, having stood face to face with the possibility of nothingness. It is precisely this confrontation that gave his philosophy its strange and luminous power. In his darkest hours, James realized something that would guide all his later work. The meaning of life is not found in escaping despair, but in facing it with courage. Despair, he saw, is not the absence of hope, it is the presence of a demand. It asks, will you still affirm life when life gives you no guarantee? He did not dismiss the weight of suffering. He respected it, he examined it, and in doing so, he discovered that the soul does not grow in spite of suffering, but through it. The energies you seek, the vitality, the purpose, the fire are often forged in silence, in those nights when your soul pleads for clarity and none arrives. These are not dead spaces. They are sacred. James's greatest insight here is that your response to suffering matters more than the suffering itself. Will you interpret your pain as proof that life is meaningless, or will you see it as the place where your deeper self begins to speak, not with comfort, but with truth? He writes of the sick soul, the one who cannot gloss over pain with optimism, and who therefore has access to a more profound form of faith. This kind of faith is not belief in a doctrine. It is trust in the possibility of meaning. It is the decision to live as though your experience, however fractured, contains the seeds of transformation. And it is precisely when you feel least powerful that this decision becomes most powerful. Because it is then that your consent to life is not casual, it is an act of defiance, of dignity. To activate your inner potential, James insists, you must stop waiting to feel ready. You must stop postponing your life until it feels safe or clear. That moment may never come. What comes instead is the raw reality of your own unrest. And within that unrest, a question: what will you do with what you've been given? This is the turning point. Not a climax, but a quiet shift. You stop searching for permission and begin living from what James calls your volitional nature. You act not because you're certain, but because the alternative is paralysis. And in that action, flawed, frightened, sincere, you begin to recover your energy. Not in a surge, but in a current. A current that deepens as you follow it. What James offers is not a ladder out of pain, but a deeper immersion into the life you already have. He invites you to reframe your experience, to stop asking whether you are broken and start asking what your brokenness is trying to teach you. Because often, it is there in the rubble that the real self speaks its first word. You are not your past. This is not a slogan. It is a metaphysical proposition rooted in the psychology of William James. He argued that identity is not a substance, but a stream that can shift direction when new energies enter its current. To say you are not your past is not to deny what has happened. It is to insist that the meaning of what has happened is still being written, and that you, even now, are the one writing it. James did not believe in a self determined solely by previous experience. He believed in the creative power of attention. What you choose to notice, to value, to pursue, that becomes your reality. Your inner potential is not accessed by dissecting your history, but by reconfiguring your present. The past may shape you, but it does not imprison you. The prison is in how you interpret it. He offers us a crucial insight. The mind grows by what it feeds upon. If you fill your consciousness with regret, fear, and repetition, you will live in a closed circuit. But if you allow even the smallest intention toward growth, toward truth, toward integrity, that intention becomes a seed. And consciousness, James insists, is a field that responds to seeds. What you plant, consciously or not, will grow. This is not self-help optimism. It is moral realism. James knew that some wounds never fully heal. But he also knew that suffering, when aligned with purpose, becomes a source of energy. It becomes fuel. Not in the sense of erasing pain, but in transforming it. Pain becomes depth. Doubt becomes inquiry. Weakness becomes a path toward humility. And paradoxically, strength. He invites you to view life not as a problem to be solved, but as a field of potential to be activated. And the activation does not occur when you feel certain. It occurs when you act, despite uncertainty, in favor of what your deeper self longs for. That longing is not a distraction. It is a compass. You may have failed. You may have lost time. You may have betrayed yourself. But James insists, the question is not what you have done. The question is what you are willing to do now with what remains. Are you willing to risk a new pattern of thought, a new mode of engagement, a new relation to your own experience? Because this is how energy is released, not by magic, not by waiting for a perfect moment, but by deciding, in the middle of your imperfection, that you will move towards something more real, something more congruent with your inner truth, and then acting in alignment with that decision again and again and again. Each time you do, you change. The change may be imperceptible at first, but it accumulates. It reorganizes your neural patterns, your emotional reflexes, your sense of what is possible. You become someone who lives not from reaction, but from intention. And that, James tells us, is the essence of freedom. There comes a point in every life where the old explanations fail. The stories you told yourself about who you are, what matters, what's possible, begin to disintegrate under the weight of your own experience. This is not a failure. It is an opening. William James saw these moments not as endings, but as invitations, calls to step into a deeper, more dynamic relation to life. He was adamant that we are not spectators in this world. We are participants, co-creators, and every act of attention, every decision to interpret and experience one way rather than another, adds to the reality we all inhabit. This is what makes life strenuous. And also, what makes it beautiful. James invites you to become a moral artist, to shape your inner landscape not through escape, but through engagement. The energies you seek are not elsewhere. They emerge in response to how you meet what is already here. Do you meet it with resentment or with receptivity? With cynicism or with wonder? With passivity or with an active hope that transforms your vision? He writes that the world is still in the making, that the future is not a fixed sequence but a field of potentialities that respond to our choices. This means your inner life matters, not just privately, but cosmically. When you decide to live with integrity, when you refuse despair, when you act in faith without proof, you are not just helping yourself. You are helping to shape what reality becomes. And yet, James never flinched from the darkness. He knew that life often feels meaningless, that suffering is real, that doubt is constant. But rather than avoid these truths, he built his entire philosophy around them. He believed that the deepest kind of energy comes not from comfort, but from confrontation. When you say yes to life even while carrying your unanswered questions, you participate in the making of meaning. So if you are waiting for your inner potential to appear fully formed, you may wait forever. But if you begin to live as though it were already present, if you act in alignment with a self you can barely glimpse, then you begin to call it forth. Not through force, but through fidelity. James believed in what he called the faith ladder. You begin with a maybe, you act as if, and then only then do you begin to see the fruits. Most people never climb that ladder. They want guarantees before they commit, but inner energy does not work that way. It demands risk. It demands that you wager your life on what feels true, even when you cannot prove it. And here lies the threshold. Will you live a reactive life, dictated by circumstance and past conditioning? Or will you live a generative life, where each day is an experiment in meaning, a rehearsal for the self you are becoming? The choice is not abstract. It is embodied. It shows up in how you speak, how you treat others, how you respond to failure, how you spend your time. It shows up in whether you choose to wake up again and again to the unfinished business of your own existence. You are not here by accident. Not in the sentimental sense, but in the Jamesian sense. You are part of a universe that is not yet complete, and your actions, your beliefs, your private wrestlings with meaning contribute to that ongoing process. This is not mysticism. It is metaphysical realism as lived through the lens of moral experience. William James did not ask whether life has meaning. He asked, can you live in such a way that meaning is created? This is your task, not to discover some hidden essence already prepared for you, but to participate in the shaping of that essence through the quality of your attention and the direction of your will. Your inner potential is not a thing to be unlocked. It is a horizon that expands with every authentic act. It is the becoming of your own soul, day by day, choice by choice. And yet, this is not a solitary endeavor. James knew that inner energy is intimately connected to relationships, not in the conventional sense of popularity or romance, but in the sense of moral resonance. You awaken when your life begins to echo in the lives of others, when your courage strengthens someone else, when your honesty invites honesty, when your struggle dignifies the struggles around you. This is the quiet revolution, not loud, not public, but relentless. 1,000 small decisions to live as if your inner life matters. Because it does, and not just for you. For the world that is being shaped by the invisible pressures of every soul trying to find its way. In this vision, the spiritual is not otherworldly. It is the name we give to that which deepens, intensifies, and connects all things. So let me leave you with a final question, the kind that James would not answer for you, but would insist you carry with you. What would your life look like if you believed, not abstractly but with your whole body, that your daily struggles are part of something sacred? If that question stirs you, if it opens a space inside you that feels both terrifying and true, then this is your moment. Like this video, subscribe, and share this message with 3 others who walk with questions of their own. Not to spread answers, but to widen the conversation. To signal that we are not alone. That our energies matter.